In the beginning, the Douglas team was only a handful of workers, but in 1924, the name of Douglas was firmly implanted in the field of aviation. For in that year, Douglas planes made aviation history by completing the first flight around the world. Hundreds of people were at the airport to commend the pilots and the Douglas Aircraft Company. Some of the most noted figures of the day also cheered the event and personally congratulated the pilots.
The pictures you've just seen represent milestones in the Douglas Company history. You're going to become part of this tradition yourself. Welcome to Douglas. I'm what some of you might call an old-timer, like this Douglas World Cruiser. I can remember that first round-the-world flight. I even remember when the first Cloudster took off. I was pretty young, though. But, well, I'm getting a little ahead of my story. First, I want you to meet a man who, most of his life, has been an important part of the Douglas tradition. He's now the president of the company, Mr. Donald Douglas, Jr.
I want to welcome you to our organization. When I say we're glad to have you with us, I'm speaking not only for my father and myself, but for all of the men and women of the Douglas organization. We believe you'd like to know something of the history and the many products of our company.
As you can see, our den is full of Douglas history and achievements. As any old-timer will tell you, the Douglas story is exciting and it's fun to talk about. It's a story that spans the history of aviation from jennies to jets. It's a story lived by men and women, many of whom are still with us, who well remember the drawing board operation in the back room of a small barbershop in Los Angeles. A sharp contrast to our present complex of production, service, and design facilities. Equally vivid are the memories recalled by this picture of the Cloudster, the first Douglas airplane. Looks kind of odd, old-fashioned now, doesn't it? But poised out there on the end of that bumpy dirt runway, with the prop spinning and the smell of hot castor oil and wet grass heavy in the early morning July sunshine, she looked fine, real fine. She looked particular. Well, it did. And a new era was born, in which Douglas-built planes were to carry more payload, farther, faster, longer, and for less operating cost than any other. In 1924, these world cruisers, built by Douglas for the Army, flew around the world, covering 28,900 miles, an unheard of feat in those days. They proved the soundness of the Douglas design. The illustrious Douglas commercial, or DC series of airplanes, began with the DC-1. Within a few months after its initial flight in 1932, the DC-1 broke 19 American and world records for transport aircraft. With the DC-3, commercial aviation came of age. No aircraft in history has earned a greater reputation for dependable service than this universally famous 21-passenger transport. Douglas produced 11,000 of them. Workhorse of the airlines, thousands of DC-3s are still in commercial service. Yes, those were some of the big events of the 20s and 30s. It all began in the back room of a barbershop with one man's dream. The Long Beach Division in California, built during the winter of 1940 and 1941. In 1942, demand for World War II aircraft carried Douglas expansion to Tulsa, Oklahoma. The most recent addition to the Douglas family was a division in Charlotte, North Carolina. The exteriors of our 5 plants may look much like any other factory, but inside, man's most recent dreams are coming to life. Luxurious ocean-spanning transports, carrier-based bombers, air-to-air and ground-to-air missiles, gigantic ballistic missiles. But I'm getting ahead of my story again. There was World War II. Douglas aircraft earned an enviable record during that war. Among the combat veterans was the Havoc A-20 light bomber. This same military version of the DC-3, the indestructible C-47, the most honored airplane in its class. Big brother to the C-47 was the C-54 Skymaster, the airplane that inaugurated the age of transocean flight and laid the foundation of modern global aviation. In all, the combined Douglas divisions built 29,385 of the airplanes produced during World War II. Their total gross weight was 216,000 tons, 1/6 of the total American output by weight, and perhaps 1/3 of the total number. For the Navy, A-3D and A-4D Sky Warrior carrier-based jet bombers were produced. Then came a light. For the Air Force, B-47 bombers were produced under contract to Boeing. Additional wings for the Air Force include B-66 and RB-66 light jet bombers and reconnaissance aircraft. Also from the production lines of Douglas roll the mighty weightlifters, C-124 Globemasters, and now the C-133 turboprop transports, the giant Cargomasters. With these aircraft, the military are proving out some of their new strategic concepts. For example, the C-133A is capable of airlifting any of the Air Force's IRBM and ICBM missiles, as well as the necessary ground support equipment. To keep abreast of the rapidly changing times, Douglas continuously maintains an extensive program of experimental development. Out of such development came aircraft ahead of their time. Aircraft like the supersonic Skystream, the Sky Rocket, and the needle things are going on. New missile and airplane projects for the defense of America today. Research and development that will assure continued leadership for tomorrow. Probably never before in the history of this nation have major events of international scope created such a sense of urgency in our national defense planning. Almost overnight, the possession and accelerated production of modern weapons systems became the overwhelming concern of our government and people. In this new planning, missiles assume a greater and greater role. Douglas has had a long and successful background in the missile field, dating from 1941. Today we are producing missiles like Genie, an air-to-air rocket carrying a nuclear warhead, capable of destroying many enemy bombers in a single shot, with the equivalent of thousands of tons of TNT. Also in the air-to-air category is the Sparrow II, an advanced missile for the Navy. The Army's Honest John, an artillery rocket capable of using either a conventional or nuclear warhead, is another Douglas product. Douglas is also delivering to the Army the Nike family of air defense missiles, the Ajax, the longer-range Hercules, and the mighty Zeus. Batteries of Nike missiles have been guarding our cities for several years. A highly publicized missile for the Air Force is the Thor IRBM. This 1,500 nautical mile ballistic vehicle was test-fired many times at Cape Canaveral and is now in operational use at overseas bases. Thor is also most dependable as the prime power package for advanced long-range ballistic missile re-entry test projects, and as the powerful first stage that propelled the Air Force Space Probe Pioneer. Douglas has achieved the most varied experience over the longest period of time in all of the missiles industry. Douglas is the only American manufacturer to have developed systems in the categories of air-to-air, surface-to-air, air-to-surface, and surface-to-surface missiles. Missiles and other military weapon systems are important to deter war in critical times. But Douglas is not dedicated exclusively to defense projects. The name Douglas is synonymous with commercial aviation. The DC-6 and 7 series, mainstay of the world's airlines in the post-war years, carries millions of passengers and mountains of freight on regular schedules over oceans and continents. Airplanes of this type rank with the famous DC-3 as the most successful commercial aircraft ever manufactured. The production of modern aircraft and missiles entails many complex engineering and manufacturing procedures. An airplane like the DC-8 is the result of great vision, long experience, and hard work. At this point, I would like all of you to see some of the many methods that are followed when a Douglas product like the DC-8 is produced. It all begins with engineering, where design specifications for each separate detail of every new airplane are worked out. When the design engineering is completed, ideas only exist on paper. There's a long way to go until the paper ideas are turned into a fleet of jet transports. Production activity actually begins on the airplane when a schedule is established. Delivery dates determine the ordering of raw materials, purchasing of parts and tools, as well as controlling the rate of fabrication and assembly. We organize to have a production flow, a steady river of materials. The purchasing department goes into action and determines what is needed from blueprints and schedules. These orders materialize into carloads and carloads of parts, metal and rivets, lights and fabric, castings and forgings, electrical wire, steel wire, all of the 1,001 items that comprise an airplane. Before these items can be used, however, there is still more paperwork to be done. The highly trained men in the planning department decide how, where, and in what order each unit is to be fabricated and assembled. In addition, they determine the type of tooling required. Tool designers work out highly accurate dies, jigs, and fixtures. Making the tools is a precision job. In some cases, tolerances as close as 1/10,000th of an inch are required. Many ingenious tooling devices, like these plaster patterns, simplify manufacturing problems. Proven tooling techniques are used at Douglas. But in addition, new tooling methods are continuously being developed in our shops. With materials and tools on hand, it's time for manufacturing to take over. The function of production control has been described as having the right part at the right place at the right time. Production control regulates and controls the workflow through all manufacturing processes, from initial supply of materials to the fabricating department, through all phases of production, inspection, processing, sub-assembly, major assembly, installation, and final assembly. This responsibility ends. Fabrication of detail parts begins in the machine shops, where they are milled in precision machines, turned on various types of lathes, and drilled to meet exacting blueprint specifications. Routers carve the outlines of essential sections. Huge gantry cranes move heavy dies from storage points to working areas. Some parts of an airplane are formed by giant hydro presses, others by punch presses. Many sheet metal operations require hand forming, while in others, complicated stretch presses are used. This one, built for the DC-8, is the biggest press of its kind in the world. Operations at the burring bench remove rough edges from the fabricated parts. To protect parts from deterioration, many are processed in various chemical solutions. All the time manufacturing is in progress, maintenance men work steadily to keep machines in good repair. When a detailed part is completed and scrupulously inspected, it is ready to be delivered for assembly. The transportation department, ever mindful of schedule, delivers these parts to the assembly section, where they are stored in cribs and racks. An important skill in subassembly is welding. Welding by hand and by machine. Riveting is another valuable technique used in subassembly. Hand riveting done automatically. While all this is happening, the accounting and tabulating departments are keeping track of labor and material costs. Accounting is important, since it supplies vital information on how production stands in relation to men, materials, parts, schedules, and finances. Major assembly of a Douglas product, like a DC-8, begins when all sub-assemblies are ready to be combined. Most large sections are put together with the aid of huge jigs and fixtures. Electricians connect a maze of wiring. Constant inspection makes certain that every part meets exacting specifications. Production rolls along to the point of final assembly, where wings and fuselage are joined, where the separate and detailed jobs of many Douglas employees combine to change the ideas that were outlined on the engineer's drafting board into a three-dimensional reality. Production procedure is much the same at all Douglas plants. Whether the finished product is one of our massive ballistic missiles, like the Thor IRBM, the dependable workhorse of the space age, produced by the Santa Monica Division, a sleek, graceful queen of huge Air Force cargo carrier from the Long Beach Division, a powerful jet bomber for the Air Force from our Tulsa Division's Modification Center, an accurate anti-aircraft missile like the reliable Nike Hercules with its atomic punch produced for the Army by the Charlotte Division, or swift and versatile new wings for the Navy from the El Segundo Division. These are not just airplanes and missiles, but Douglas products, built in the dependable Douglas tradition, with no compromise in integrity of design or workmanship. These vehicles of the air are a tribute to the men and women of Douglas who build them. On the job, each employee has the protection of the best in safety equipment, which has resulted in one of the finest safety records in all of industry. A fine employee benefit program, including a comprehensive insurance plan, is available to protect employees and their families. Life insurance is provided to give additional security for dependents. Douglas has in effect a pension program, which is a real help in making plans for retirement. The Douglas Welfare Store is convenient and cooperative in helping the employee buy clothing, appliances, or gifts at Christmas. Employees can borrow money through the services of the credit union to fix up a home or buy a car at the lowest possible rates of interest. In addition to raises in pay, good work is recognized by promotion into better classifications and supervisory positions. And employee suggestions are welcomed and, if accepted, are rewarded with cash. Employees receive paid holidays and vacations and enjoy a full program of organized recreational events. Convenient to California. Well, that gives you some idea of what we do and how we do it. I've enjoyed this opportunity of talking with you about the company. We'll be looking forward to seeing you on the job.
Teamwork is essential in our business. Each one of us doing our job to the best of our abilities helps produce the world's finest airplanes and missiles. And that is the Douglas secret, a fairly simple one if you come right down to it. We take good tools, put them in the hands of good employees, and come out with a really superior product. Welcome to Douglas.